In this video, I'm gonna show you how I make my 50% whole wheat sourdough. Hearty, healthy, full of flavor, absolutely one of my favorite breads to make. Let's get started. For the 50% whole wheat sourdough, we're gonna use the recipe from my blog, but we're gonna use a stiff levain this time. There's gonna be not much difference in the end product, but I encourage you to try both and see what works best for you. We're gonna start by putting our container on the scale. I'm gonna add to that 194 grams of ripe levain, 110 grams of water, and 170 grams of flour. Now, because this is a stiff levain, I'm probably gonna finish this by hand. So we're gonna start with this spatula, and then I'm just gonna get in there and squeeze right through it and try to pick up all the bits of flour. I spilled a little bit on the table, we'll pick that up after. And this is gonna take a little bit of work, but it will come together very nicely. Once you mix your dough a little bit, you can put a bit of water on your hands to just take off anything that you don't want on there. And you should be able to pick this up into a ball. I'm gonna place that on the table. And you can see it's quite stiff, but if we work this together, it comes together in a nice little round ball. There we go. And now I'm gonna just grab a little container. We're gonna stick this inside and we're gonna place this in our proofer for about 3.5 hours. While we wait for our starter, we're gonna Autolyse our flour and water together. I've already weighed this out, so I'm gonna start by placing the water in the mixer. Next, flour. And I'm just gonna close the mixer and start the mixing process. As the dough mixes, we're gonna scrape down the sides of the bowl. I always keep a pitcher with a bit of water and a scraper beside the mixer. I've already measured out my salt. I'm just gonna place it on top of the mixer so I don't forget it, because I always forget it if I don't put it there. We're only gonna mix this until all the dry ingredients are combined. So let's take a look and see how it looks. You can put a bit of water on your hand and kind of feel through the dough, and if it feels like there's no dry bits, stop the mixer. This is good, so I'm gonna stop it here. I'm just gonna take my levain out of the proofer and place it on top of the mixer for the last hour of fermentation. We're gonna let this rest for about 60 to 90 minutes, and then we'll mix in our levain, the salt, and a little bit of extra water. To help demonstrate the process of Autolyse, I'm gonna stretch a little bit of the dough out now so you can see how it tears. So you can take it, see how it kind of stretches up and tears right away. It doesn't have a lot of strength to it. Our dough has been Autolysing for about 90 minutes. Let's take a look. So I'm gonna wet my hands. You should be able to see a difference in extensibility, and when you pull on the dough, it should have some strength. Ripe and ready, so you can see it's all bubbled on top. It's got a very strong, pungent, acidic smell to it. We're just gonna scoop this into the mixer. Try and get everything in there, like that. We're gonna close it up, and we're gonna mix it. I usually reserve a little bit of water to mix in the salt and the levain, but because we're doing a larger batch, I'm just gonna pour a little bit out of the pitcher. Of course, you wanna measure this if you're doing a small batch, because that amount of water can make a huge difference, but in a larger batch, a little bit of water like that's not gonna hurt it. So we're gonna let this mix now for a total of about 15 minutes. So I like to set a timer. We're gonna let it run while this mixes, and in about 5 minutes, we'll add the salt. The salt's gonna tighten the gluten up a little bit, so we're gonna mix it, get everything incorporated, and then we'll add the salt. This mixer doesn't have a speed 1 or 2, and I'm mixing at 125 RPM right now. Our dough's been mixing for about 15 minutes. Let's take a look. So we're gonna see the dough has ridged. It looks kind of like a pumpkin. I'm gonna put a bit of water on my hands and we'll stretch this up. Try and get it right up there for you. If you want, you can take Wet hands, pop off a little chunk like this, and then just try to stretch out that piece. And you're gonna see it stretches pretty clean. That's a pretty great window. Once your dough is finished mixing, we're gonna put it into a container. I'm gonna use this Cambro container. It's kind of perfect for this size of dough. I'm gonna put a little bit of grapeseed oil, wipe it out. Boom, like this. Wipe this out. Now, if you have a squeeze bottle, you can put a squeeze bottle with a bit of oil and water mixed in, and you can spray the container out. That works really well. So here we go. And we will now take our dough out. So with wet hands, you're gonna wet your hands, grab a chunk through the dough, and you should be able to take it out in one piece like that, and then in the bin. A well-developed dough will stick to itself. So if you take a little piece of dough, you can get all those little bits out of there, and it should stick to it. Now, once you've got this in the container, we're gonna give this a very, very light fold. So I'm gonna wet my hands, and I'm just gonna kind of throw the dough over itself. I'm not really looking to stretch it out right now. I just wanna bring it together. And that is going to bulk ferment now for about 3.5 hours. So we're gonna place a lid on it. First, actually, we're gonna take a temperature, very important. So we kind of nailed our DDT here. We are 27.5, which is perfect for this dough. We're gonna place a lid on it. I like to write on my dough calculator that I printed out for this recipe, the time, when the first fold is, when the second fold is, and when I'm shaping. That way I don't forget. I'll also set my timer and let me know when to fold it first. So I'm gonna give this dough about 90 minutes before the first fold. And I'll see you in 90 minutes. Sourdough's been resting for 90 minutes. It's time to fold our dough. So I'm gonna get wet hands and then get in here, just wet the top a little bit, loosen the sides, and then we're gonna pull this up and give it a good stretch. So you can see when I pull it up, it really comes together and the whole dough picks itself out of the bin. That means it's got really good development. Look, I'll do that again. When you pick it up, there's no bits left in there. That's a really strong, happy dough. So you're gonna put this on and we're gonna give it another 60 minutes before we do our second fold. 1 hour is up. It's time to give our dough a second fold. You should see now lots of bubbling, really good rise. Now this time we're gonna kind of fold this under. So I'm gonna pick it up towards me, allow the dough to fall under, turn the bin halfway, and carry on the process. So we're doing a coil fold here. It's gonna be a little bit more delicate. Scoop this up and right back into your container. The dough has really good volume. It feels very nice. We're gonna let this relax for another hour, and then we're gonna do our pre-shape. Bulk fermentation is over and it's time to shape our dough. Now you can see the dough is risen. Wow, look at that. It's got lots of bubbles on top. It's really sort of looking beautiful. Now let's dump this out. I'm gonna move the water so don't spill it. And let's see. Should come out pretty easy like that. So if the dough is really well mixed, you won't have any bits on there. And move this out of the way. And now we're gonna pre-shape these. I'm gonna do 900 gram pieces. So I'm gonna grab my scale, my little scraper. You can use a metal scraper. I'm using a plastic one right now, but only because this was my old dining room table. So it's a force of habit, so I don't scratch the table. And I'm aiming for about 900 grams. So what you're gonna do, we're gonna take our scraper, put the dough in front of you, and just use the scraper to round the dough into a nice ball like that. You should have some tension. The dough doesn't stick to your hand, and then we're gonna move it to the side. Okay, remember how to do it? Keep this on the table. We're gonna let these doughs rest for about 40 minutes on the table, and then we'll come back and final shape them. You don't need to cover them this time, because it's okay if they get a bit of a skin on them. All right, so our dough has relaxed on the table, and it's time to do our final shape. So I'm gonna just get a little bit of flour, and we're gonna dust the top of our loaves. I don't like to use too much here. Try to use as little as possible. So when you first start out, you might need a little bit more. And then we're gonna separate our dough from the rest, flip it over and put the part that was down up on the table. Stretch it out into a little bit of a rectangle. Gonna bring the bottom down, seal. Sides can come out and seal. We're gonna bring the top to the middle, and then we're just gonna stitch up the sides. Now this is a great way to shape when you first start out. Bring it up and kind of roll it tight, okay? I'm gonna set this aside. Now this could go right into the banneton, but I'm just gonna set it here for now, and then I'll dust my bannetons after. This is a great way to shape when you're first starting out. If you're working with extensible doughs or higher hydration doughs, there's a lot of different ways to shape bread, and it's just best to find what works for you. If you notice that your dough is tearing a lot, you're gonna wanna let it rest a little bit longer before you're shaping, but it should be nice and bubbly, nice and light. Oh yeah, look at that. You can see the bubbles in the sides of the dough. And in some future videos, I'll do some different shaping methods for you, and we'll look at different ways to shape batards and boules. We're gonna let these rest for about 5 minutes while we get the bannetons ready. I'll scrape the table off and we will get into the baskets, and then we're gonna place them in the fridge overnight. I'm using rice flour here. Normally I use a combination of rice flour, rye flour, and coarse bran, but I don't have any coarse bran at the moment. I have to mill some flour, and then I'll lightly sift the coarse bran out of it. So we're gonna dust the baskets, and we're gonna let these sit on the table for a few minutes to relax, and then we'll squish them into the basket. All right, the dough has been resting, and we're gonna just scoop this up and put it in the basket. So I'm gonna dust this with a little bit of flour, just so it doesn't stick to my hand. Take the scraper. You take there's two lobes or two sort of sides of it, and we're just gonna squish them together. And this is gonna develop a lot of tension and give us a really great oven spring, okay? Just like that, we'll do them all. I like to leave the ends open and sort of the way they are, rather than try to clean them up and pinch them shut, because I kind of like those little nubs on the end of the bread. I like the way they cook, and I like to eat them, so I'm just gonna leave it. But of course, if you want, you can squish those up, sort of like that, get in there and give it a pinch if you want, up to you. Flip this over. Now, I'm gonna place these in the fridge after, but I'm gonna let them hang out for about a half an hour. My room is pretty cold, so that's something to keep in mind. If you're in a very warm environment, you're probably gonna wanna get them in the fridge right away. And mine have also been resting on the table for a while. They feel nice and light, so I'm gonna stop there. So there's our 6 loaves. We're gonna just cover these. I'm gonna use a plastic bag that I'll reuse over and over and over. I'm gonna scrub the table down, and in that time, we should be ready to put them in the fridge. "50% whole wheat sourdough has been resting in the fridge overnight. It's time to score and bake them." The oven has been ripping at 550, and these are very, very hot. These are Challenger bread pans. So we'll grab our first 2 breads and get started. Now, depending on your dough, what you're making, sometimes I like to leave these out for a little bit before I score them, and other times I'll bake them right from the fridge. Now this dough is pretty proofed and pretty ready to go, so I'm just gonna bake them right out of the fridge. If you wanna do a side-by-side, of course you could do that, and you'll see you get a little bit better volume. So I'm gonna take the lids off. Nice volume, nice and risen. Take your blade, place it on, and I'm going to open it up and score both. I'm going to use a spray bottle, and I'm gonna spray a little bit of water into these Dutch ovens. You could use an ice cube, but I prefer to spray. Oven was preheated to 550. I just fired the bread and dropped it to 500. This is the very first time I've actually baked sourdough in a brand new oven, so I'm being a little on the cautious side. Usually I let it rip because every time you open the oven, you drop so much heat. All of our bread is out of the oven, and it's time to take a look at the inside. You can see here, I'm using a new fridge for the bakery space, and I have two that are a little bit overproof. Now these two are on the very top shelf, but this will give you an idea of an overproofed loaf and a well-proofed loaf. So you can see how it just doesn't have quite the volume or the ear. That's because it was a little bit warm overnight in the fridge, but I can fix that and we now know. So let's cut this open. Do you want to do the honors? All right, ready?
I want to cut it.
Okay, take the knife. Okay, watch out. Where do your hands go? Woo!
I want some bread with butter.
What do you want?
Bread with butter.